All right, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, April 24th. And we're here this morning on S-102. We've been taking testimony on this. We've gone through a whole process on this bill so far. We have had some collective bargaining 101 testimony, just to get a background on it. We've had Labor Relations Board. Then we had some testimony from witnesses, and we've walked through the bill again. And now we're in a stretch this week where we're going to be taking more testimony, probably more deeply on the items that are in the bill. There's three distinct sections in S-102 with the possibility of a planned possibility of an amendment for adding assistant attorneys general to the list of employees that can organize. First section is captive meetings, is prohibiting companies from penalizing people from attending captive audience meetings. The second piece is to take agricultural laborers and domestic workers off the list of exempted work areas that are exempted from being called employees. Third piece is on majority vote. And the fourth piece, the amendment, would be on the assistant attorneys general. We have a number of witnesses lined up for this morning. I don't think we'll be meeting back again this afternoon. The expected time frame of the day is that we should be done perhaps by 5 or 5:30 is the estimate right now. So we won't be back in committee on S-102 today on anything. Tomorrow morning, we'll take more testimony on S-102. I am actually going to duck out at 9:30 for, I need to testify in the agricultural committee on this bill. So Representative Chestnut Tangerman will be leading the conversation. So we have 5 witnesses lined up for today. And I see Sam Rayon. Is Richard Nelson here today?
Yes, sir.
Great. And I see Elmi online, and it'll be a bit. And then later on this morning, we'll have Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture and Sarah London from the Attorney General's office to talk about other elements of. So with that, I'm just going to turn the microphone over to Representative Chestnut Tangerman. I'm just going to scoot out so I don't interrupt the testimony, and then I'll be back with that.
Okay. So Richard, would you join us, please? Take a seat at the table there. And for all the people in the room who have not been here before, we'll go around the table and introduce ourselves.
Okay, I'm representing.
Starting with Representative Stevens. That's his back. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm Kathleen James. I represent Manchester, Arlington, Sandgate, and part of Sunderland.
Okay.
Joe Parsons, I represent Newbury, Thompson, and Groton.
Emily Krasno, South Burlington. Farley.
Hi, I'm Dennis LeBounty, and I represent Linden, Newark, Sutton, Sheffield, and Wheelock.
Haber.
Good morning. I'm Elizabeth Burrows and I represent Windsor One, which is Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor.
Sure. And I'm Larry Labor with Meth, but 12 towns, Orleans, that's District 1.
Yeah. I'm Representative Robin Chestnut Tangerman, representing Middletown Springs, Paulet, Rupert, Wells, and Tinmouth in Rutland County.
Yep.
And I'm Richard Nelson, and I'm one of the owners of Nelson Farms up in Derby, Vermont. I'm also on the North Country Union High School School Board. Nelson Farms encompasses over 6,000 acres of land, over 2,800 mature cows. We milk on 2 sites currently. We just made a huge investment in infrastructure into the state of Vermont. Our greatest asset, our largest expenses on Nelson Farms is number one, purchase concentrates, the grain we feed our cows. Number two, it's labor. Our greatest assets on Nelson Farms is our land, our people, and our cattle. And I list them in that order because land's always a tremendous asset. They don't make it anymore. But our people make our cattle a great asset. And our people that work with us on the farm are vital to our success. We employ up to 45 people, seasonally dependent. We have a crew that work with cattle. We have a crew that works with nutrient management. We have a crew that works in the office. Everyone bringing a different skill set. Every one of them vital to our operation. Excuse me for this. In farming, in agriculture, first of all, federal law prohibits farmers from unionizing to control our markets. We're absolutely prohibited for doing what other groups get to do. So you've all heard the saying, we buy everything retail and we sell wholesale, depending on the markets. We have no control. We have zero control on what we're getting for our product. We can hedge, we can buy insurance and whatnot, but we really don't have control. We take the highs and the lows. On the farm, everything is so time dependent. When a cow is having a calf, she needs to be tended to then, not half an hour later, not an hour later, then. When it's time to milk cows, they got to be milked then. When it's time to cut the hay, it's got to be cut then. When it's time to plant corn or chop corn, everything has to be done then. Our people understand that, and we have a great working relationship with our employees. In today's labor market, especially on the farm, and I see it in the schools too. The labor market's very tight, exceedingly tight. And when our employees want a raise and we'll have a meeting, they tend to get a raise. And they're not over demanding. And, everybody knows what's going on in the rest of Vermont. We know what's going on. Our employees know how much people are getting paid in Newberry. They know how much people are getting paid over in St. Albans. And we know as well. And if we don't match or exceed, we could lose some key employees. We have employees that have been with us for 10, 20, 30 years. And I believe that's testament to how well we take care of our people, because our people take care of us. I always like to say, I work with you. You don't work for me. I work with you. This second part of taking ag exempt out could have ramifications to animal welfare and to the markets and food stability of the state, of the country. And assure you that if a group were to go on strike, And I don't even like to talk about it because I would hope that it would never come to that. Cows would get milked. Absolutely, cows would get milked. And things would change because it's an animal welfare issue. I mentioned I was on the school board. I've been on North Country School Board for, I think, 15 years. I'm part of the negotiations committee. I've sat through a lot of negotiations. I know how it works. We've never had a strike at North Country. We're proud of that. We've always worked very well with our staff. We have a great staff at North Country. I also know once you put everything in a handbook, you live by that handbook. Right now, we have the flexibility to take care of our individual people as needed. We don't have a handbook to go by. So if somebody needs more than their allotted time off or sick days, and they're been with us for a number of years, we've paid people for months while they were out because of a medical issue, and housed them and took care of them because they were a valued employee. Once you get everything in the handbook, that you go by the handbook. And I'm sure some of you understand what I'm talking about. And I don't like to be that way. And we try not to be that way at the high school with our staff. We granted extra unpaid leave to 2 teachers last night so they could attend their son's graduation at Tulane. And we were happy to do it. And the union hasn't held us to set standard with any of that yet. But that bothers me when everything is set in stone in the book. And it'll create expense to our people that work for us, and it'll create expense for the farm. And I don't see the need for it. I realize that not all employees are treated equally across the board on farms. I understand that. And I will agree that it's wrong. And they can move on. I would hope they would move on if they weren't treated correctly. They're all great people. Anyway, that's enough about me. Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, and then Representative Gross.
Thank you so much for coming in. Can you explain to the committee, it's been a very, very long time since I've done it, but can you explain what happens to a cow when they aren't milked?
Well, they'll start to leak milk. They'll be very uncomfortable. They'll pace and moo and beller and start leaking milk. When they start leaking milk, eventually they'll go lay down. Their teat sphincter, their teat end sphincters will be open, bacteria will get in, and there will be some severe health issues in the udder. And could lead to cows being culled prematurely. That's the biggest issue with it.
And how many times a day are your cows milked, and should cows be?
We milk at our farm 3 times a day. We have a very high producing herd. Those cows are making, the average at the dairy in Harrisburg is, and we're milking 1,800 cows in 5 hours at that farm. And we have a great team. That's a testament to our team. We milk 1,800 cows in 5 hours, 3 times a day. The average The average is close to 30 pounds every time, which would be 4 gallons. Some of those cows are given 150 pounds a day, which is 50 gallons. It'd be over 6 gallons per milking.
And if I'm understanding correctly, I think the issue that you have with the exemption being removed is the thought of striking. What would happen? Like, I mean, you don't know currently because there is the exemption in there, but what do you foresee happening if your workers were to strike?
Well, it wouldn't be like a factory or a school where you just shut down for a week and go into heavy negotiations, get it figured out. Cows would get milked. Absolutely. Family members, friends, whoever we could find, cows would get milked. And that's gonna happen. And that's just the way it's gonna go. We would not, absolutely would not, could not. And it would be criminal of us not to.
Absolutely.
So that's the big thing right there. And cows need to be fed, and the baby calves need to be fed. You imagine someone going on strike in January and those baby calves are out there and they're not getting fed their milk, they're getting the energy they need to survive. They'd be dead in a day. They'd be in a cold January, they'd be dead in a day. It can't be tolerated. It is an animal welfare issue. Ask Kristen Haas, our state veterinarian.
And I know most of the time when cows give birth, they can do it on their own, but there are times when calves get stuck. Can you kind of walk us through what happens then?
They call me.
I've done it once or twice. Better you than me.
They call me, and if I can't do it, I call my son. His arms are about 6 inches longer than mine. No, the whole key to aiding a cow that needs help and giving birth is catching her 15 minutes before she knows she needs help and not finding her 6 hours later. And, we go in and take care of that animal and assist her and her fetus, the baby. And then as soon as that calf's born, there's a whole chain of steps that are taken, right or wrong. Today's agriculture economy has driven us to this model that everything is fast and moving at a torrid pace. Except for the pandemic messing up supplies, food inflation has been very, very, this is the cheapest country to buy such a diverse amount of food. Our cost, is it a percentage of the GDP? Is that what I want to say? It's so low in this country compared to any other country for a safe, diverse food supply. It's absolutely incredible. And it's because of the ingenuity and the science and the people on farms.
Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate.
Senator Burrows.
Thank you. When a cow is born in January, are they able to get milk from their mother?
We get the milk from the mother and feed it to that calf. We don't let nature, we don't have nature play into it. We do it.
So the baby is not allowed to nurse directly from the mother?
No, the baby is with the mother for a half hour, depending on how many calves are being born at that time, maybe an hour. We like the mother to dry the calf off, to lick it off. It's good for the mother. It's good for the calf. It stimulates the calf. It helps the mother release hormones and whatnot. And then we milk the mother and she goes off into a pen. We take care of the cat and the cat goes off into a nice box stall, straw that deep, and gets a blanket put on it and meets its surrogate mother.
Does your farm belong to a cooperative? Is your farm part of a cooperative?
Yes, it is. We belong to DFA.
And, are there any labor requirements put forward by the cooperative?
That would be a question for my nephew. There are some requirements. And, but I don't know. I couldn't speak to them. But we're going through those steps now.
Do you have any sort of employment contract with the workers that outlines an agreement between the two of you, how you're going to treat each other?
We're starting to, do have some job descriptions. It's really informal.
So no written contract?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Representative James, then I have a question, and then Representative LaBelle.
Great. I have to leave at 9:45, so I apologize in advance.
It's fine.
One thing that I really appreciate you being here today. This is a tough one for me. I'm not gonna lie. It's
It's a tough one for me
Yeah,
to come in and talk about.
it's a really hard one. And one thing I wanted to ask you about was, philosophically, a lot of times we pass laws or, create programs, unfortunately, to like address the worst case scenario, right? And so, for every employer like you who treats their folks like family, and you mentioned this, there's the, there are the one or two folks who don't do that. And a lot of times that's what draws our attention, right? Because you have to help those folks. And one of the things I wondered about was you said that, for those bad actors or for those people who work at farms where they're not treated poorly, you would hope that they could move on. I would hope the same thing. And I wonder how mobile you think folks are truly able to be. Can they pick up and move? Do they have kids in the schools? How far would they have to commute to get a job at a better farm? Like how in the real world, like how able are folks to truly get a job at a better place? Just your take on it, because that's what I think about it. If everybody were perfectly able to just go get a better job somewhere else, then the market would do the work for us, I guess.
Yeah, so prior to us upgrading our facilities were rough. And it was, we treated we didn't like to work in there. We did, but none of us liked to work in there. And we'd have people leave and they'd get done their shift and, their shift to start up again, you'd say, hey, where's Joe? He was already in Watertown at a new job. We only have one family at our farm. And I'm talking about the people that work with cattle. We have several families on the outside crew and whatnot, and their kids on the farm, and we buy high-vis clothes for their kids so they can wear them, because you got a bunch of little kids this tall running around. We want to be able to see them. We buy high-vis clothes for all our employees. We have just one family. Would love to have more. Their kids are wonderful. They're all wonderful people. We enjoy it. And to have the little kids teaching you how to speak Spanish is a real treat. Right there, we let that one out of the bag. But they're highly mobile. and we've had need for an employee and, someone will call up and say, I have a cousin. I have a cousin, he's at another farm, the farm's no good, and we've gone and picked them up. They're mobile. In my, from what I know, they're very mobile.
Very good. I apologize, nothing
Thank you.
to do with you.
No, I understand. Busy place.
Yeah, thank you.
It's raining today, so I'm not feeling so bad about that,
And so Mike, quick question, and I think you've already alluded that you're not the right person to answer it. But in reading other people's testimony, I've been reading about something called the FARM program, which is farm employee conditions set up by the,
We are going through farm now.
okay,
And I'm not part of that team.
Yeah.
And our management team, I'm more, the nutrient management and, pesticide management and whatnot on the farm. My nephew, my brother are, working on more of our HR team. And, but we're going through farm now because my wife is our veterinary of record and she was doing that part a couple weeks ago.
we'll get more information from other people on that.
But farm does watch out for that.
Yeah.
And it's a good program. And I know that
I can
DFA,
get you more information on that as well.
Okay,
So follow
great.
up.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. And I know DFA is big into the farm.
Had a couple more questions, Representative LaBounty and then Representative Burrows.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I was born and brought up in Barton, so I know the farming community
Yeah.
and I know that farmers have been struggling for years and years, and it shows with the amount of farms that we have compared to like back in the sixties and seventies when we had like 6,000 of them. And now we're struggling. And it's not just, with the veterinarian pay and then with labor costs, and you have no control over, the cost of feed, and you have no control of the cost of the sale of your milk either. And plus you have, all the other supplies that come with it. I have a brother-in-law that works with IBA, and so
Mhm.
so I know quite a bit about the farming situations out there. I was just wondering, off the top of your head, do you know what it costs to produce 100 pounds of milk now, and how much you actually get for it?
So with interest rates today, we're backwards.
Yeah, I knew you were. That's why I wanted to.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to ask the question.
And interest rates really caught us bad. We booted that. And that's the difference right now of cash flowing and eating equity. So currently, right now, we're eating equity, although the price of milk did move a little bit here last month, and we're a little closer. Yeah, we're a little closer, but payroll gets met every week.
Thank you.
Just before you ask a question, Sam, is it all right if we switch the order, you and the next witness?
Sure.
Okay. I understand the next witness has a time constraint.
Yeah.
So go ahead and ask, and then it's all
If
right.
you have any questions for me, I'll be here for a while.
Yeah, thank you.
Mine is a really quick and easy question. You mentioned that your farm just went through an upgrade. Is your upgrade complete, and when was it complete, and how long did it take?
We've been milking in a new facility now for almost a year and 5 months. And no, we're not done.
Thank you.
Oh, comment from Representative Howard.
Hi, I'm Mary Howard, and I represent Rutland District 6, and I apologize for coming in late
That's fine.
and hearing the beginning of your testimony, but I'll look back on it. I just want to thank you for coming in, and also thank you for being the great employer that you are, because if we don't have farmers, we don't exist. And I think the farmers markets have taken off incredibly. I mean, there's, our farmers market, there's always a crowd. So, thank you for treating your employees like family. I think it's very, very important. So I appreciate it.
It is very important. We work together.
Loyalty. It's something about loyalty.
I always thought we were doing a pretty good job when I've had when we've had employees that have been with us for so long. And they've been through the good and the bad. And we've seen them have terrible times and they've seen us at terrible times and we've always been there to help each other.
Speaks volumes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to go to Almi Landauer. Is that your, did I butcher your name?
No, you did pretty well. It's Almi Landauer. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. And you are an adult services specialist with South Burlington Public Library, is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, thank you for being with us today, and you have the floor.
Thank
or the
you.
microphone.
Thank you. I have more prepared notes than your last testimony, but so forgive me if I keep looking down. Yes, my name is Almi Landauer and I'm a librarian. I've been working in Vermont libraries since 2007. I hold a master's degree as well as the Vermont Certificate of Public Librarianship through the Department of Libraries, which is a great program, by the way. Thank you for hearing my testimony today. I've been at the South Burlington Library not very long, since 2021. And I love serving the public. I love my profession. I want to thank the Vermont Senate and House for working on S-102 that will expand human and workers' rights in the state. I would like to describe to you why the decision to join a union was important to us at the South Burlington Public Library. In order to secure more equitable treatment and how we went about doing that. So as was mentioned, I'm an adult services librarian. South Burlington has about 23,000 residents and it is the second largest city in Vermont, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. So South Burlington Public Library is one of our larger libraries in the state with 7 part-time, 9 full-time, and 5 substitute employees. The library has grown remarkably in the last 2.5+ years since we've been in a new building in South Burlington's new city center. And we provide critical services to all, including welcoming the entire gamut of diverse residents and visitors in our urban/suburban community. When I was hired in 2021, I noted that my job description said non-union. And over the course of a short period of time, I picked up on the fact that all of the other employees that work for the city of South Burlington did belong to a union. I asked a few of the library staff who'd been there many years if they knew why the library had been excluded or not included. The answers ranged from it's just the way it's always been to the former director told us that we get all the same benefits anyway, so what's the point? Or just that the library was a little bit out of sight, out of mind because it used to be in the school, in the high school. Around the same time I started at the South Burlington Library, a new city manager came on board in South Burlington, and fairly early in her tenure, she decided to make a one-time improvement to the hourly wages of library staff in order to reduce the pay gap that had been allowed to grow between the library staff and the unionized city staff. Other benefits were not addressed or increased, just the pay rates. And I believe those adjustments varied a bit by position. And while this was good news for most library staff, it also highlighted that whatever pay and benefits the library staff had been receiving over the years was subject to the whim of the city manager. Some years, yes, some years, no. And this differed markedly from the stabilizing and dependable annual COLA and longevity increases that all the other city employees received as agreed to in their labor contract. So out of curiosity, I located the South Burlington City/union contract on the HR portal. And I learned from reading that contract as well as my own personal experiences as an employee and experiences shared with me by other library staff that in fact, library staff were not receiving the same benefits, pay, or job security, and thus we were not being treated equitably. So this was clearly unjustified and disturbing to us, especially because the library staff is mostly female and our salaries and benefits had long been suppressed. It's that 83 cents on the dollar coming to life. So in May of 2023, I reached out to the AFSCME, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, to see if there was a way for the library staff to be included in the contract that the rest of the city employees were part of. And after an educational conversation with the AFSCME representative, during which I asked a lot of questions, I shared the info I'd gathered with a few other library staff members. And these conversations revealed significant low morale and discontent with the current conditions. This small group met again with the AFSCME rep to ask questions and better understand how the process would work should we decide to take that step. At that point, we decided it was time to reach out and have that discussion with the rest of the library staff about the possibility of joining the union. That initial group called a meeting that all staff were invited to. We invited the AFSCME rep to be there to answer questions. And during that meeting, we reviewed the process of unionizing, the dues, the possible timelines, and everybody had opportunities to ask questions. There was also discussion about issues at the library and how we might start to address those. Towards the end of that meeting, during which many of the staff expressed interest and support of the idea of the library joining the union, we made union cards available to sign there or for people to take home and decide later on. A solid majority of people at that meeting did sign cards that day, and several others, including some staff that have been hired in the meantime between that meeting and today, have also signed on to be union, union members. Those that chose not to sign cards remain valued and respected colleagues, and their decisions are honored. There was never pressure or discrimination against them in the workplace or as we bargained with the city. If they changed their minds, they'd be very welcome to join. The three staff members who decided not to join the union all work very limited part-time hours. So right now, union membership in the library accounts for 13 out of 16 of the eligible library employees and one position that's currently unfilled. So the other steps followed naturally, starting with declaring our intention to join the union. And next was requesting voluntary recognition from the city. That step turned out to involve quite a lengthy period of negotiating back and forth with the city about which staff members would be eligible. During that process, a crucial meeting was requested with the city to discuss a variety of workplace issues, including pay for the library staff whom the city was deeming ineligible for joining the union due to some supervisory duties. And that meeting proved productive. Once that process concluded, the rest of the eligible library staff met collectively to decide on our needs and wants in bargaining, our priorities. And finally, we began negotiating our first agreement with the city at the bargaining table. And in early April, the library staff and the city bargaining team reached a tentative agreement, I'm happy to say. The library unanimously ratified that tentative agreement on April 17th, and the South Burlington City Council will vote on it in May. So it's been just about a year of effort, which we hope will be concluded next month. And we are looking forward at that time to a more equitable workplace for the library staff within the larger city employee group. And having helped lead the library staff through this process, I am convinced that the part of the bill that addresses card check elections is an important avenue for improving the quality of life, equity, and a productive and cared for workforce. Using card check as described in S102 to gain the right to join or create a union would significantly decrease unnecessary delays that like what we experienced, and increase the respect and the agency due to employees as they attempt to unionize. Thank you. Those are my comments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. And if you would like, you can, would you submit your written testimony to our committee assistant? Have it be part of the record?
Oh, sure.
It's your choice, but you're welcome to.
Okay.
And we have questions from Representative Burrows and then Krasnow.
Hi, thank you. Am I right in recalling that the University of Vermont's librarians also unionized in the last year, 2 years?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Oh. Okay, thank you.
Sorry. I'm sure that information is out there somewhere, but.
Well, it seems it's very, very close to where you are, and it's the same workers. So I am surprised that you weren't aware that unionization was going on right down the road.
Well, it's university versus not versus, it's university librarians and public librarians. So we're sort of a different group. We don't necessarily have a lot of connections between the two. I'm guessing that would be an entirely different union as well, because they're not state, municipal, or maybe they are state. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which union they would be in, if it would be the same or not, but we didn't discuss that during our process. So.
It surprises me that you would both be going through unionizing at the same time and not be aware of each other. Thank you.
I don't know if they were aware of us or not. And maybe there's other people in South Burlington who are aware of it. I personally was not.
Thank you.
Representative Krasnow and Parsons.
Yeah. Well, hello. It's nice to see you in this role when I'm not coming to the library and checking out a book or having a legislative forum. But I want to thank you so much for coming in today. And you know, I share your beliefs, and I'm so grateful that you led this mission to help folks in our community, many who live in our city as well. As a former union steward myself, I know the work that goes into organizing, and I'm really grateful and that our community can now be proud that our library will have that. I'm curious now, it's got my mind going. And again, maybe, you know, not everyone coordinates efforts, you know, across the region, but if other library staff have made these decisions as well, and I can obviously research that as well, but I didn't know if you knew, you know, larger libraries or with a lot of employees, if they had done that as well.
Yeah, there's not a lot of unionization in libraries. And I think you're correct that it's mostly our larger libraries. And I think part of the reason for that is because they belong to larger municipalities. And
Right.
those larger municipalities tend to have their city employees in a union. As you probably know, we have 187, I think, libraries in Vermont, and the vast majority of those are very small libraries with just a few employees in small towns that also just have a few employees. But but there are certainly in Chittenden County, a larger number of libraries who are in the union. And I think I know that there's others scattered throughout the state, again, mostly in our larger libraries. I know that I probably shouldn't say the names because I don't know where they're at in their process, but I know there's a few libraries right now who are just starting to think about it. So.
Well, that's great. And, thank you for raising those inequities, so that we can hopefully get those addressed. And, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Of
Thank you for saying so.
course.
Representative Parsons.
Thank you. Yeah, you had mentioned your support for the card check portion of the bill, and I was just curious, I'm always looking for parity. In your opinion, if you think card check should be like a process-wide thing where if you wanted to be represented by another group, the decertification process should also be the same card check process. Because right now, as it stands, it would be card check to join the union and the current process still to decertify to join a different one. So I was just curious your opinion on, should that be a kind of a system-wide, I guess, the way I'm thinking of it? Should it be that same card check process to decertify if you wanted to be represented by somebody else?
I'm pretty new to this. Sorry. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm pretty new to this process, so I hadn't encountered the aspect of decertifying, so I'm not really familiar with that process. I think I don't think I should probably comment on it too much without knowing more about it. So, yeah.
I believe, I mean, feel free to correct me, but it's the same process that you went through to certify the union.
So you mean, so are you saying that if as a whole group, the city of South Burlington employees wanted to change from AFSCME to a different union, is that what you're talking about?
Correct. Do you think the card check process that you said that you believe is a good idea in this bill, do you think that should be the process as well?
So in other words, you're saying, should it be a majority of the union members would need to agree to change unions? Is that what you're asking?
Right, just the majority would agree to sign the card check, if you will, and then that automatically triggers it instead of having a vote.
I'm sorry if I can clarify.
Yeah,
Please.
it would just be the librarians.
So the current, the proposal in the bill says that if you're not represented by another union, you can join one or gain union representation by the card check process, 50%.
Okay.
Because there is then a union contract in place, to decertify would not be that same 50% plus one, but would be the process you just went through, the longer process with the elections and the negotiations in order to change unions or decertify the present contract. And I'm sorry to jump in here, Representative Parsons, but if
that clarifies.
So which way does the bill have it now?
Currently, the bill has it so that if you are not represented to form a unit, the card check process.
Right, but I mean the decertification, what does the bill
It
address
doesn't do
that?
it, it's silent on it, so that it would continue to be the same process as is current, right?
I see.
Well, what would happen is that with the Vermont Labor Relations Board, you can decertify if you get 30% of the employees to sign up that want to decertify.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they have to go through, and then they have to go through the process, however long it's going to take, then they need 50% plus one to decertify. Okay. Now, the catch is not any union can go in there. So if, let's say, this is AFSCME that she's with, okay? AFSCME is part of the Vermont AFL-CIO and also on the national AFL-CIO. I'm with the steelworkers. they can't decertify and then come to us and say, hey, we want you guys to represent us because we're in the same organization.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay,
I just was.
Yeah,
curious.
yeah.
The card check process should be used.
yeah, okay, all right.
So is there still a question for me?
I guess if
Seems
you're
like you
feeling-
guys know a lot more about it than the decertification than I do.
Yeah, I'm just looking for parity in the bill, throughout the process. So I
see.
understand that this is kind of
That
new.
seems reasonable,
Yeah.
without knowing.
But I understand that this is somewhat of a new process and you might not have a view on that. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions or comments for Alma? Thank you for sharing your experience with us. Taking the
Thank you
time
for
to be here.
listening. Okay, I'm gonna sign off now. I have to go to work. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
See you.
Bye.
Uh,
Thank you.
Samuel, will you please join us?
All right. I suppose I'm supposed to state my name, title, organization, and speak loudly and clearly. I'll do my best to do that. So my name is Samuel Rayom. I am a content creator and marketing specialist at Jasper Hill Farm up in Greensboro, Vermont, a cheesemaker. So I'm going to speak to some things that have already been brought up here, and I'm going to start with just a little bit of context about sort of what brings me in today. So last summer, my place of employment had a bargaining unit successfully petition to hold a vote for collective bargaining. The petition was successfully submitted at around 30% threshold of the proposed bargaining unit needed to induce an election. I guess before I get too much into this, I also want to clarify and thank both the Senate for working on this bill. Many of the proposed amendments will do a lot to improve workers' rights and freedom of speech, which I appreciate greatly as an individual. But there are some process and notes about the bill that I have concerns about. So sort of back to my narrative, the process of delineating that bargaining unit that successfully filed for an election was, as I saw it and as many of my peers saw it, a closed dialogue among a handful of staff and hand-selected peers. I personally was omitted from this dialogue despite meeting criteria. I'm not a manager, I'm just an employee for general eligibility, though not eligibility as they defined it for the proposed bargaining unit. In discussions with my peers who were included in that bargaining unit, they were also excluded from these conversations about card requisition, about all of the questions that I could ask an organizer leading up to the filing of a petition. So it wasn't until the notification of an election that an open dialogue among all staff was really able to be had. So I have some background with the labor organization that was selected to act as a representative for the bargaining unit. A shop I had worked in San Francisco many years ago was represented by a different local of the same organization. My experience at that shop was largely negative. I had a very combative representative, and a lot of my peers at the time were feeling like the union was poorly suited to serve their needs and felt inadequately represented in their contract negotiations. So a little background on my attitude towards that particular union. Again, I believe that there, as businesses come in many colors and types, there are good and bad. So the election itself resulted in a failure to certify the organization as a representative for the bargaining unit by about a 3-to-1 margin. The result was the direct expression of my peers' belief that the independent nature of our organization and open vertical channels of communication with the company were not worth compromising for the overtures and offerings of that bargaining unit. Yeah, you have a question?
Are you talking about at Jasper Hill or out in San Francisco?
I'm now talking about the election last year.
Okay, thank you.
Correct, yeah. So my largest concerns are being able to create or preserve means for labor themselves, the workers themselves, to have these open dialogues. So the largest concerns I have, and I want to make a distinction between unions and labor itself. That's a distinction that's very clear in my mind. And there are parts of S102 that I believe serve labor incredibly well, and I applaud the Senate for working on that. But there are opportunities, I believe, to preserve dialogue for all laborers that language in the bill seems to favor unions over workers themselves. So just to dig into it a little bit, my concern in my experience with the local at my shop in San Francisco is the ability of a union to metastasize and no longer properly serve the bargaining unit that they represent. As I mentioned in my original outreach, my main issues stand with the addition of 4A to 3 VSA section 941 and H1 to 21 VSA section 1724, which the bill language outlines the automatic certification, the card check process, which we were just talking about. Multiple concerns. The first is upon reviewing the National Labor Relations Act, Section 8, and 21 VSA, Section 1621. I personally can't determine whether labor organizations are compelled to inform, workers that they're attempting to organize, that these card check triggers could happen. So I'm concerned about the onus of understanding something procedural falling onto the laborers themselves. Again, maybe there is something in terms of how unfair labor practices are outlined for both employers and labor organizations that I'm missing, but that's how it appears to me.
I'm sorry, can you, I missed that point there. Your concern is about whose responsibility
So
is?
when a labor organization is organizing laborers within a business, those workers might not know the law. They might not understand that there is a card check procedure in place. So I was trying to determine, is there an onus on either the part of the labor organization to say, like, when you sign this authorization card, if we reach a certain threshold, it will be an automatic certification and no election will be held,
Maybe doing an automatic process rather than.
Right. So where do these workers get that understanding from, unless they're going to the law itself and reading it and understanding it, which I don't presume to always be the case. So one is like, where does the onus or where does the access to that information arrive to actual workers? Dennis seems.
Representative Labonte.
Thank you. In my experience as an organizer, what I would do is I would have, and they're not captive audience meetings. We have our meetings off-site. It might be in a library or wherever. We invite anybody in the organization that wants to come and listen to, what card check is, how the process works, answer any questions they want.
Mhm.
So that's how we get our information out to the employees. Now, it's up to them to decide if they want to come and listen. As it is now, and in the real world, is that the employer will have captive audience meetings saying, you have to come to our meetings. And chances are it's going to be all negative about the union, period. And so that's what we're trying to get away from. We want to make it so that they have a choice, just like they have a choice to come to our meetings to explain what a union is. They don't have that choice in the employer realm. that they have to go to and listen to what the employer has to say. So that's how they get
Yeah.
their information.
I appreciate that.
And then the other thing we do is when we do have a list
Uh-huh.
of names, we would go to their house and explain to them one-on-one, because some people don't feel comfortable asking questions in a group. So we will go and ask, if they have any questions. And, and so that's how I used to organize.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Representative Labonte. I, as an employee who could have been a qualified employee for being part of a collective bargaining unit, was never afforded that opportunity. The process didn't unfold in that way. So I think just from my personal experience, my concerns come from like cherry pick campaigning, right? Where maybe I would be a part of a proposed bargaining unit and there are conversations happening to hit a 50% plus one individual threshold that I wasn't even aware of as an individual who is potentially subject to a proposed bargaining unit without chance for casting a vote in an election. So it's a concern. My second concern has to do exactly with what you brought up, which is lack of parity in the decertification process. So Section 1584 of the bill has not been modified other than to change the language to talk about an elected and or certified representative. So just adding in certified there to imply, to making way for the aforementioned revisions to be effective. So, on the flip side, the bill continues to preserve the 30% threshold to induce an election and then have an election. So there is a campaigning period for both organizers and the employer, or not necessarily the employer, but employees to talk to one another about what kind of decision they're going to make. So there's an election preserved on the decertification process if a union doesn't serve any longer, or if there's a labor organization that workers feel more compelled to join. It's the bill isn't working the same way out as it is in, which is concerning to me. So at a minimum, I'd like to see that 50% plus one threshold be applied to the decertification process. That is sensible to me. Though I believe that the card check process, as I was sort of illuminating, can create situations in which there are people who end up in a bargaining unit who haven't had the opportunity to be in dialogue with their peers and understand the implications for what that labor organization would have on their day-to-day, their lived experience at work. And this sort of all ties into like the thrust of why I feel strongly about this, which is like I moved to Vermont to work for small independent businesses. Like I prefer working in an environment with a close-knit team where, the hustle can be real, but I have pretty clear lines of communication vertically through an organization. I've lived in large cities. I've worked for all sorts of different types of organizations. I've worked for myself. So I've decided for my career and for what I'm interested in doing with 8 or so hours of my day, 5 days a week, which is a lot of my time, which I hold dear, is to work in a place where I can be in open dialogue with my peers. So ultimately, I think card check can work against that in certain campaign scenarios. I don't think that's always the case. I appreciate the removing of frictions for workers to be able to, express their rights, have their rights, and organize if they so choose. But ultimately, I find it runs contrary to the spirit of small business that attracted me to this state to begin with. And again, that's just about keeping channels of dialogue open and insisting or asking the committee to consider situations in which the lack of that dialogue mixed with the card check language can create the silencing of that 50 minus one set of workers potentially.
When you're done, I
No,
just want to get.
yeah, please.
Okay, so for the record, you stated you work at Jasper Hill Farm.
That's correct.
Is that your first farm in Vermont that you worked at?
I worked at a vineyard in Vermont as well.
And so you talked about your lived experience going through organizing and negotiations at your current employee.
Mhm.
And can you talk about what your role was with that?
I wasn't involved or asked to be a part of that dialogue. I made my opinions clear once it was open because I was an employee, I wasn't a manager. I had my experiences with the labor organization. The local that they're attempting to bring in seems to be not as bad as the local I was dealing with. So I'll give them credit for that, but my role was just to provide my voice.
And what's your relationship or role at work with the owners of the company? Do you have a closer relationship with them or worked with them closer than other employees?
I have a professional relationship as I see it.
And so can you talk about your primary reason for coming in to testify today?
Right, is to draw attention to the potential scenarios in which a card check could result in a certain segment of workers never having had a voice in the process of adopting a representative from a labor organization. And also to encourage the committee, if card check is sort of a core tenet of this bill, to at least allow for parity in the event that the labor organization no longer serves those workers. And I believe they should be afforded the same sort of lack of friction in the decertification process. That is the thrust.
Representative Brooks.
Thank you. How many employees are there in total at Jasper Hill?
Around 89, I believe, 80 to
Oh, right.
89. I don't know exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions or do you have further comments?
Thank you for hearing my testimony today.
I guess-
Representative Parsons.
Yeah, I guess I'll just kind of echo, I don't have any experience working under a union environment, but kind of what you explained is similar to the way I think about my employment, how a card check system could very easily, I believe, create a system where people are now in a union that they had no idea. It could be done in 2 days, really. I mean, I just think of myself as somebody who's been, would be in a unit of installers, say, and there's 25 of us, most of which have been there less than 7, 8 years, and I've been there 20. I'm just an installer. I'm not their boss, but in the way something like that works, I'd be seen as somebody who could go around and they take my opinion a little more than I believe they would others, or I could just cherry pick who I'd like to sign this card, and then 2 days later, when it shows up to work and now have a bargaining that nobody knew about. I just think of it in that light when I think about it. So thank you for coming in.
Yeah, upon reading the bill, I didn't see anything safeguarding that. And I don't see anything in the National Labor Relations Act that prevents that style of campaigning. And ultimately, my preference is for workers who would either be subject to the bargaining unit or would be impacted, have their role impacted by the adoption of a bargaining unit, have their voices heard. And again, it's a core, like there's a distinction I make between organization and labor. And the preservation of the voice of workers is where this comes from for me. It's not to discount the ability for workers to organize. It's not to do anything else. It's for workers to have their voices heard.
Appreciate that distinction. Thank you. Committee, we are going to take a 10-minute break and please be back at promptly. The next on the agenda is Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture.